for further analysis, Chris Doyle is joining me from London. He's a Middle East commentator and director at the Council for Arab-British Understanding. Chris, thanks for being with us. So we're hearing there from our correspondent in occupied East Jerusalem, Rahul, about the Americans arriving. They are concerned somewhat about the way things are going with this ceasefire deal. I mean, what's it going to take to keep the ceasefire deal alive? The reports keep coming in of Israeli attacks killing more Palestinians. Arguably, you could say that this ceasefire deal is quite broken.
It's going to require a massive amount of consistent, persistent American pressure, because it is only the Americans that have any sway with Prime Minister Netanyahu and his coalition. And frankly, that is what is needed. There are many in Netanyahu's cabinet, arguably even Netanyahu himself, who would not really be at all bothered if they had to recommence full-scale Israeli military operations in Gaza. They now have the live hostages out, and indeed quite a substantive number of the deceased out of Gaza. So what is holding them back? They could see in their eyes a victory over the horizon whereby they can complete the utter smashing up of Gaza and define victory under their own terms. It needs the United States, it needs President Trump to be ever vigilant and to call them out, because what we are really seeing here is provocative attempts by the Israeli authorities, the armed forces, to trigger a Hamas response that could be violent and lead to Israeli fatalities as an excuse to annul this ceasefire. And it was, of course, the Israeli government that broke the ceasefire back in March. So that is one major element, American pressure. It will require, of course, regional powers, those interlocutors, like Qatar, Egypt, Turkey, to also be involved on working in terms of, yes, making sure that Hamas adheres to its obligations under this deal, but also to find creative ways of trying to unlock some of the tricky issues like disarmament, demobilization, the destruction of any remaining tunnels, all of these issues, but also to find those remaining bodies, both Palestinian, there's an estimated 10,000 Palestinians under that rubble, but also the remaining corpses of hostages taken from Israel. So that requires, for example, specialist equipment, the fuel, the experts to be able to go in and assist in that hunt. So it needs all hands on deck. And I just point one thing out finally, that it was just over a week ago in Sharm el-Sheikh where we heard this completely overblown rhetoric about how this was a new dawn for the Middle East, that it's going to be peace, across the region, everything was going to be wonderful and lovely. And, there were many of us, myself included, who poured some cold water on that and said, this is a ceasefire deal. And this is the reality we're seeing. It's nothing more than a ceasefire deal. It's a precarious one. There are many ways in which it can fall apart, and we have to work very hard to shore it up.
And one of the elements, Chris, that was meant to be just sort of in that first few phases of Trump's peace plan is the freeing up and the resuming of humanitarian aid. I mean, we've seen 2 crossings reopened, Rafah still unopened, and the Israelis seem to be clinging to this excuse, if you will, of the dead hostages remaining in Gaza. But as we know, the reality of extracting those bodies of Israeli hostages is going to be very difficult in many ways for Hamas. So do you think that for the US it's a priority to be pressuring Israel on that issue of humanitarian aid?
Well, let's hope that is the case. And let's be clear about one thing. Even if you accept that Hamas have not acted in good faith regarding the bodies of these hostages, which is possible, it is not acceptable ever in international law, according to any moral code of conduct, to then respond by restricting aid to a population that is starving, suffering from famine. That should never be one of the options available to Israel. The crossings into Gaza should all be open. It should be unimpeded access. It should be that all aid agencies should be allowed to operate freely away from military control within Gaza as is their mandate. So this is where the United States and other powers should be much clearer. Israel cannot collectively punish the population of Gaza if there are just accusations that a group like Hamas has not adhered to the ceasefire terms. That is just simply wrong. The aid is vital, it's needed. People are dying of hunger, of disease, of absence of vital medical medicines, medical goods, and equipment. That has to change. And that is not something that should be negotiated. These restrictions should be lifted in total.
Chris Doyle, Director at the Council for Arab-British Understanding and Middle East commentator. Thank you so much for your time with us here on TRT World.
Thank you, Isabel.